Yes.
So in today's talk, what to expect? Well, we're going to talk about the impact of cultural diversity in design. We're going to set some ground rules for the way that we're going to talk about these things and what we mean by cultural diversity. Then we're going to talk about leveraging AI for cultural inclusivity. How can AI be utilized to actually tailor experiences based on cultural insights? We will talk about adapting AI-driven interfaces. So what are the inclusive design considerations when designing interfaces? Fostering empathy, right? This entire talk is about fostering empathy and how we can actually promote that in our designs. Then we will talk about AI, privacy, and consent, because any conversation about AI is about data, and so it is very important to talk about that. Then we will talk about, sorry for my slides, then we will go over some conclusions, some key points from the talk, and I will leave some time for Q&A, hopefully. Okay, the impact of cultural diversity in design. So, I mean, I could tell you very obviously it influences the design, right? But I want to use some examples to actually show you why it is essential for us to understand these cultural nuances and norms and how they impact the user experiences that we design. Let's use some examples. So I can speak about my own country. In Iran, the collective cultural values may prioritize community, harmony, and family connections. So as a result, they do impact the user preferences. Things that are more oriented around family or people's connections just align more with the majority of the population in the country. In contradiction, individualistic cultures that are mostly in Western countries may prioritize personal autonomy and self-expression. So that means different user expectations are set in different countries depending on their cultures. That's a very, very simple way of talking about norms and values and how they impact our decision-making and our preferences. So if you look on the left side, it's an example of something like Amazon. That's, again, my simple way of explaining things. That's called Digicala. It's a same like e-commerce concept of Amazon for Iran. And on the right side of the screen, you see Amazon. Now, I opened both of them in incognito mode. What happened is a very hard way of reading between the lines, but you can see most of the contents and recommendations on the left one is family-oriented. They're about like cleaning your household, cooking, things like that. Whereas when I open Amazon, it's a very entirely different experience for me. That's just one simple example of how these products feature prioritization and how even the recommendations in terms of e-commerce websites are oriented around these cultural norms, values, geographical locations. Then we will talk about cultural nuances, right? We had an understanding of how cultural norms impact the user preferences and decision-making. Now we're going to talk about how colors, symbolism, communication, and style also impacts user preferences. Well, again, it's not a surprise. I started the talk with this, but colors have different meanings in different cultures. So the user perception changes based on where they're from. Example of it is that the color blue that you see in the applications on the right side of the screen, that is, at least in these examples, it's used for Facebook, a lot of the banking applications in the US, and also MyChart is a healthcare system that is being used in parts of the US. The color blue may symbolize spirituality and tranquility in Iran, while in countries like US, it may evoke feelings of trust and professionalism. So when you place an interface in front of people, they have different emotions towards the interface that you put in front of them. Well, we talked about the cultural norms and nuances, but geographical location in general also impacts the user experience. One of the main things that we often forget is the speed of internet in different geographical locations. The speed of internet, along with the availability of the application, contents, music, pictures, it's just going to change on its own. The availability of contents, applications in different regions does influence people's experiences. One of the interesting things that I learned about Meta in one of Envision documentaries that is on their website, if you watch it, was that there is this capability on Facebook where it allows, at least they had it back then when they created the documentary, where it would allow employees to experience Facebook with a lower speed internet, which is, in my opinion, is pretty amazing. Their rationale for doing it was specifically to understand the experience in India. I think that was very amazing, at least a good initial step to actually better understand how these people even view or interact with these experiences. So I think by now we're kind of convinced that understanding and embracing the cultural diversity in design is the key to creating global and culturally inclusive experiences, and you have seen some examples of it. Well, another benefit of promoting these cultural inclusive principles is that you increase empathy, right? The promotion of empathy and understanding by creating these connections between the experiences that you design and the products that you build and these users who are going to be using it is just an invaluable experience. That is part of the magic of these products that we create. So it is important to know that ignoring these cultural considerations will definitely exclude some groups of people in the world. That's a huge responsibility. Now that we have a better understanding of cultural nuances and norms, let's talk more about how AI can be used to create a more culturally inclusive experience for people. Well, I'm going to, again, dive deeper into some of the different ways that AI can do that. And I love using examples, so those are the best part of and most fun of the presentation, in my opinion. So, well, it's very obvious. By incorporating cultural insights, you're going to have a more inclusive AI system. In this example, I asked ChatGPT 3.5, hi, how are you? And it responded, the response was, hello, I'm just a computer program, so I don't have feelings, but I'm here and ready to assist you. How can I help you today? Well, I love the fact that it does tell me that it doesn't have any emotions. It reminds me that there is, it's just a computer program. But at the same time, when I ask the question in Farsi, it becomes more interesting. I say, hello, how are you, in a very casual way. I'm saying, like, literally the word by word is like I'm saying, hi, are you doing well? And it responds in a very kind of formal way. It responds back, hello, yes, thank you, how are you, how can I help you? Which, in my opinion, is a very formal way of responding because there are more, like, easier way to respond. Now, there is a part of it that I admire. And that's about, when we talk about the cultural inclusivity in design, we talked about symbolism. There's also the communication style that is different in each country, right? The truth is, generation of people change in each country, but the truth is Iran and a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, they're more like formal type of countries. So if you want to create a better content design experience with them, you need to be a little bit formal. And I'm going to share a funny story about that. So I admire the fact that the tone changes to a more formal tone, actually. But then at the same time, I have a question about why doesn't it actually tell the user that it doesn't have emotion anymore? What happened to that part of the experience? How is it different? Is it not that important for that part of region? Then how come it is important for me to know that and be reminded? Why is that difference happening? And I might not have all the answers to those questions. Now, the funniest story I was going to tell you about the formal tone of Iranians was about my dad. So a couple of weeks ago, he came to me and he was like, I can't find my contacts on my phone. He's this Iranian old guy in his 70s. He says, I can't find my contacts that I've saved on my phone. And I'm like, well, that should be a very obvious one. You've been having a phone for a while now. What's the problem? And I open his contacts, and the problem is he has saved all of the names with titles. So everyone is either Mr., Mrs., something. So the definition of first name and last name is not applicable to his scenario at all. Like, you need to design another experience for my dad and his type of persona. Also, you need to also know that even for me, yeah, although he doesn't use a title, he has like, my dearest Sayena. So there is no way for you to find any contact within his phone. I just wanted to use that funny example to show you how formal can some of the ingredients be. It just shows and points, validates the assumption that I had over there. Now we talked about that. Well, we also need to talk about the recommendation systems with AI, right? Context-aware AI algorithms can adapt user interfaces very dynamically, very fast, based on cultural context. They provide a very seamless and intuitive user experience across diverse cultures. Most of the very big companies, let's say like a streaming company like Netflix, does an amazing job with this. So this is Netflix in Japan. The contents, the wording, everything changes based on the location. I mean, personally, it would have been amazing if Netflix could also identify that I'm an Iranian living in the US and would do something magical over there, but that hasn't happened. Still, the Netflix in US is very different from Netflix in Japan, and that's pretty amazing. It's not just about the experience, it's about the tone, it's about the colors, it's about everything that they do, it's about the emails that they send you. Everything changes when you're from a different geographical location. So it was mentioned before that AI-driven interfaces need to be trained about these visual interfaces. These visual differences in each culture, meaning all the tones, the languages, the symbolism, and their differences in different culture. Now I have this example of, if it works, I have the example of AI interfaces that are tailored to different cultural backgrounds. I'm using Microsoft Bing as an example, and the reason I bring it up is because Microsoft Bing is trying to figure out the right balance between that conventional search results experience, kind of similar to Google, with the Copilot responses. I'm trying to control it, believe me. I don't know what's wrong. But the fun part about it is when I searched how to boil an egg in English and Farsi. What you cannot understand, and I can explain to you, is that the tone does change, and the responses are different, but it's still, in both cases, it does give me the answer that I'm looking for in the way that it makes more sense to me. Funny enough, this is not a good representation of the entire persona. But the one at the bottom, which is in Farsi, works so well for my parents. It's the videos on top of the page, it's all the Iranian contents, even the way that the Copilot responds to the question aligns so well with the tone that they receive this message in. It just makes them trust the experience more. A lot of the things that we discuss here are fundamental, whether the design is for AI or non-AI experiences. But the truth is the power of these tools to be trained and create culturally inclusive experiences makes them a very unique opportunity. Building AI systems that can recognize and respond to users' emotions, vocal cues, and other verbal or nonverbal signals across different cultures, they will help build amazing experiences that better adapt with users' requests, and they provide just more accurate results that align with their needs. And this is not something we're talking about that's going to happen in 20 years. It's happening right now, right? We have deepfakes who can recognize and analyze emotions and recognize them. However, it is also critical to address the biases, right? I talked about all these magical things, but there are biases. And that's very important. I mean, these are not edge cases. These are essential, fundamental problems that need to be solved, or else they're going to create cascading problems that are much bigger, and they just become more challenging to solve later. So on the left side, there is an article, there is a paper talking about how the deficits in facial emotion recognition and implicit attitudes toward emotion among adolescents with high-functioning autism spectrum disorder. There are a lot of research papers about the way that they perceive emotions differently. It's very important to consider that. They are part of the population. We are designing also for them. On the right side, it's one of my favorite documentaries. I don't work for Netflix. I don't. I never have done it, but The Coded Bias is on Netflix if you want to watch it. If you haven't watched it, it's an amazing documentary about the terrifying picture of facial recognitions when they become a governmental system, or when they become something, let's say, rather than these fun things that you do with the Snapchat or a deep face or all of these things, they just become things very people get arrested for them, or there are consequences for them. It talks about the biases, and it's just very, very eye-opening to watch that documentary. So it is very critical to address the biases in AI algorithms. And they are the reason why a lot of people are, they fear these AI solutions, and they're very right to be scared of them. So that's on our responsibility as well. I use those examples for race or autism, but I mean, we used the example of Gemini at the beginning of this. The problem is also that these tools they don't really have a realistic perception about the cultures either. So on the left side, I have the example of my family picture that I took in Iran. It's not in the US. And when I look for a big Iranian family, I'm probably looking for something similar to that. The results for a big Iranian family or a big Middle Eastern family, I mean, I kind of like give it the benefit of the doubts for the big Middle Eastern family because it's very diverse. But the big Iranian family doesn't even show anything similar to me. It's just something completely different. We don't look like that. There are probably some people who look like this. But you're generating like 5 to 10 images. At least one of them should be a little bit close to what I'm looking for. And so I know that prompt alternation happens on the very last layer of a lot of these AI algorithms, especially the ones that have been built by OpenAI. Microsoft has done a really good job of these prompt alternations. So if you search something in DALL-E versus search the same thing in Microsoft Bing, you will see a diverse set of results. But we talked about how it can go wrong in the Gemini example. So we talk about the example, the biases, and there is a responsibility on data experts. And I'm sure that it's not the first time that you heard about the biases of these algorithms. But it's also very important to know what we can do as UX professionals in the field in order to help mitigate the biases that lead to these consequences and do impact the inequality for underrepresented groups. So I think one of the very, very underrated solutions that I'm trying my best to actually learn more from is the combination of synthetic data and UX research. Synthetic data is a data that has been created artificially through computer simulations or algorithms that have been built out there, and they can generate the real-world kind of data sets. That's pretty amazing. So even if we are saying that we don't have access to data, we can kind of simulate it. Again, I'm very simplifying it. So what we can do as UX researchers or UX professionals in this case is that UX research is so fundamental to this entire process. We need to really have a good understanding of the diverse representation of different groups in the UX research. So it's on our shoulder to say whether the data that is training our models is actually a good representative of the diversity of the world. So we need to define user personas with as much detail as we can and capture the diverse groups in the data sets that we define. And then after that, working with data experts, we can generate synthetic data using algorithms that exist, while also ensuring the data sets are balanced and inclusive and they capture the viability of it. So I think for now, we always assume that data scientists and data experts and engineers are responsible for it. I'm saying that we're all responsible for it. It's no longer just their own responsibility. It's our responsibility to be an advocate and to define a specific criteria for user personas that can be later validated through the research, through the data that has been generated, the synthetic data that has been generated by AI algorithms. After that, well, I mentioned there are data augmentation and generative kind of like generative AI algorithms that can help create synthetic data. They should mirror the real world, but they also have biases. There are examples of them. You can definitely learn more about them. I'm also trying to learn from them, so I'm not an expert right now, but it's definitely my passion to learn more about this. After you do that, then you can validate the effectiveness of this data along with data scientists. You can see if you can test whether the data sets that you've created perform the same way as real-world examples. We are responsible for that, again. And then we should continuously update and refine this synthetic data. As we mentioned, generations of people change, geographical locations go through changes, and we should always maintain relevance and representativeness in our designs and in the user personas that we define for this. I mean, no longer the thumbs down is just the only way that we should get feedback about the AI responses, right? Kind of like I don't like it, but it's my personal opinion. So with AI tools, everything is about data, right? That means we must talk about privacy and consent to address cultural variations in privacy expectations, user control, and trust. Now, fun part. There is a difference in the way that different cultures perceive privacy and legal framework. To create a culturally inclusive product, we need to understand these cultural differences. For example, in many Asian cultures, and I wanted to use the resources, such as Japan or South Korea, there is often a stronger emphasis on identity and social harmony, leading to a more nuanced approach to privacy. So individuals in those countries may be more willing to share personal information with their social networks, but they expect stricter control over how this information is accessed and used by external parties. In contrast, in Western countries, like US specifically, or European or parts of European nation, they tend to prioritize individual autonomy and privacy rights. So users often have a greater expectation for transparency and control of their data. They just want to see that information prior to actually starting an application much faster than the other users in some of the examples that I shared. The other aspect of the AI privacy and consent is what we mean by ethical and responsible AI. We're basically talking about the concept of transparency, reliability, and user control when it comes to, oh my God, every time. When it comes to AI and the data sets that it uses. We must provide clear and accessible information about how the data is being gathered and used. This is we've heard this 1,000 times right now. Do you sometimes wonder why we continuously talk about it? It's because we don't do it enough, right? And we will talk about it until it's no longer a problem. We should talk about it. It's not going to go away. Every time we talk about AI, we need to talk about ethical and responsible AI. So it is also essential to implement privacy-enhancing technologies like encryption, to minimize the risk of unauthorized access, especially when it comes to, I can speak for my own country, when it comes to my country and the way that they overview kind of social network interactions and things like that, it's very important to consider anonymization, making sure that this data is private and nobody can access it. So, for example, social media platforms operating in Western countries typically provide users with robust privacy settings, options to control who can access their personal information, even kind of like parental rights, or you can have even certain limitations for how children use these products. In Asian countries like China, social media platforms such as WeChat integrate AI-driven features for personalized recommendations and services. However, users may have less visibility to how their data is being used due to the difference in regulatory frameworks and cultural expectations. There are articles about it. I was looking it up. It seems like they have done actually better job of making it improve the entire privacy concerns in WeChat as an example, but it is still the truth. So every time. So it is, what did I miss? Okay. It skips one of my slides, but bear with me. It just does it. Okay. I will tell you what about it. It just talks about that conduct regular audits as assessment to evaluate the compliance and privacy of regulations. Yes, you should really know the privacy regulations of the countries you design for. It's not based on all the Western regulations. It's very different for each of these projects. So I hope that understanding the meaning of cultural differences and seeing examples of how they have been applied to different products would help encourage all of us to apply cultural inclusive design practices. We are responsible for building these products. I can't tell you I can't tell you how many times I've designed experiences that it started with a certain group of people, but definitely went beyond that. They started launching this product in another country. They started launching it to another, like it started by being for just a small businesses, then it got expanded to much bigger enterprises, then it went to another country. So you just never know the cascading impact of your design choices on these products that you make, and the way they're gonna exclude a certain group of people in future versions of how, like, the scaled product and the scaled experience. So my vision for the future is a future where AI-driven products empower and delight users worldwide. They make a bridge for these cultural barriers, right? That's why they're doing it. I mean, as humans, we have our own limitations, and these tools have their own limitations. But they also can do magic with all the biases and everything. So why not leverage that in order to create a more inclusive, virtual and real-world experience for people? By embracing cultural inclusivity as a fundamental principle of AI design, we can unlock the full potential of technology to enrich our lives and promote understanding and drive positive social changes on a global scale. I have a video, it's from UNESCO. I rather not play this and have a conversation if we have that, but this deck is gonna be available after the talk. They talk about why it is very important to talk about these things and shape the future of AI from the cultural diversity perspective. And they use a lot of the examples that I went through in this talk. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it. It's just from UNESCO. They built this one. The name of the video is Shaping AI Through Cultural Diversity. But I'd rather give the time back and have a conversation about Q&A, because I talk about a lot of like idealist ideas here, but it's very important to also talk about the reality of the world and how we can actually get to that future vision of these culturally inclusive AI tools. Thank you.
So we have a question in the virtual chat, just to start out, and I quote, "As someone trying to advocate for the same in my practice, I love that you advocated more for inclusive and representative sampling in UX research. Recruiting diverse samples also takes time and money. What suggestions do you have to compel stakeholders to invest in this process?"
I love this question. Okay, I tell you what I did. So I was working, as I mentioned before, I was working specifically on the banking system and money transfer for immigrants. One thing was that I would go to places where these communities would be. I would build kind of my network of people, and that, except for like the cost of the time that I had, that was spending like going there, you know, for commute or things like that, I wasn't really taking any money from the company to do that, but it gave me a lot of insights. So one was that I would go to places, rather than recruiting these people and spending money with recruitment. When I wanted to make my point, I would go and actually talk to these people, and I would find them myself in different communities. I went to the Hispanic-speaking community, the community of Blacks in the Seattle area, all types of immigrants, Middle Eastern immigrants, like everybody, to actually test some of these hypotheses, ask them to come talk to us, show them some of the designs. But also, I will tell you this, it didn't work until I was just talking to my friend about this, until I played their voices and the videos of the things that they say about these products. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them this is valuable, it's not until they see it that they understand it. The moment they saw somebody using it saying, I don't understand this interface, it became a problem, and they understood the value of these things. So, I mean, it's a very obvious answer, but rather than talking about it, you really need to show it. And we just have a lot of potential to actually show these things to our stakeholders and people we work with.
Okay, now we will take questions from the audience. If anyone would like to raise their hand, we can pass them the microphone.
You showed the picture of the Iranian family that the AI generated. What was it about that picture that made it not representative of an Iranian family? Like, I mean, I'm not familiar with how it should look like, but just, is this, yeah, like what stood out, I guess?
So the question was, what was it about the picture of the AI generated that showed that it wasn't culturally inclusive in terms of the prompt that I gave it, which was, show me a big Iranian family. So the one on the left is the real picture, right? One thing is that not a lot of these not all the Middle Eastern countries have the hijab that you see in the picture. So it's not that you can apply that rule to all the countries that these people are wearing these things. You can also see that in multiple examples, they're showing some of the Arabic outfits. Although there are regions in Iran that do come from that ethnicity, it doesn't represent the entire group of people. So there are a lot of things, like, I think that's a very valid question. Probably I see the differences, and if there are other Iranian fellows in the crowd, they will also be able to identify how this picture doesn't represent them. But I love that question. It just shows very stereotypical norms of other Middle Eastern cultures as part of our culture, which is not correct. Yeah.
Hi there, thank you. And this is going to evolve because I'm not entirely sure where my question is here, but I fully agree with having more culturally inclusive AI training in the models. In order to do that, you have to pull in the right kind of diverse data and either talk to people or get sources from marginalized groups or diverse groups. And I know my team in particular are facing some challenges trying to pull in more, like Black American perspectives, women of color. And I think a lot of those groups right now are facing this thing of a lot of companies in the US have kind of focused on DEI, it's really important, and now they're all going to these small groups of people and all pulling in this same information or even oversampling certain groups or over-exhausting these groups of folks by being like, tell us about your experiences so that we can incorporate it. And a lot of those groups are kind of facing this, man, we've got a lot of people asking us questions and it's taking a lot of our time and energy, and they have yet to maybe see some of the changes or results in their efforts or input for, I don't know, conveying that information to these larger companies. So I don't know, what would be, I don't know, what are some steps or visions you see in including some of those voices while not over-exhausting them or while not treating people as so extractive, right? Like, we need information from you. How do you see that moving forward to create a more culturally diverse model and things to train off of?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid question. I mean, the root of it is we are UX professionals, right? We need to ask 5 whys behind why they get frustrated. My assumption is the reason they're frustrated is because we continuously ask them and we don't do anything about it, right? That's the reason. So the response is I feel so fake for saying it. The response is we need to gradually show the outcome, show the impact of the things that they say. It doesn't have to be we learned it in a very hard way. I think people, when they come to tech industry, I work in tech mostly, when they come to tech industry, there are people who think that we need to pause, not do anything until we launch the great, amazing solution that addresses everything. The truth is change happens gradually. The truth is it starts with the tone and content. Nothing about that ChatGPT integration is very culturally inclusive in terms of Middle Eastern countries, right? But when it comes to the tone that it has in order to respond to something, someone like my parents, they like it. They see it as something that is inclusive enough for them. There are biases, I see them. Yeah, of course I see them. I see the problems. I'm not stupid about them, but it's just those gradual steps. It's just the fact that the websites have a localized version of my mother tongue, my language, the language that I speak. It's about the recommendations that are available in e-commerce websites that are available in my country. You're not showing me some recommendation. It's even, I don't know how many of you experience it, but within social media platforms, it's a very, very constant experience. When somebody watches a story or a TikTok video and the audio is not available in their region, Those are exclusive experiences. Why is that happening? You know the audio is not available. Why are you just excluding me with that type of messaging or that experience? So my answer is just doing something. When we ask them questions, tell them what to expect next about it. Tell them it's not going to be an amazing experience, but it's going to happen. I forgot to repeat the question, but I hope it answers it.
We're going to take another question from the chat. A lot of the examples of cultural differences you showed are products of different presences in different countries. I'm curious about how inclusive research can impact products within the US as well, which is a cultural melting pot, meaning various ethnicities and races will use it.
I think it's more of the question was how can research impact the cultural inclusivity in US market specifically? I'm mainly a designer. I think that a researcher would definitely answer that better. But that process that I portrayed in my deck, where it talked about how UX researchers can define diverse personas, and then they can partner with data scientists and data experts to create synthetic data that represents the real world, is one example of how it should happen in the US markets specifically. We are working on it right now. This is something that I'm trying to learn. I would encourage everyone to go and learn more about the capabilities of this synthetic data and how it can contribute to cultural diversity. But it's definitely something that we're trying to learn.
So a lot of the examples that were given, I think, align really well with what you've mentioned so far in terms of possible solutions. But one example that stands out to me is the Gemini example, which seems like an overcorrection to this critique. And I wonder, other than synthetic data or like more nuanced data sets, what are ways that we could, if not watch out for these possible solutions or these wrong solutions to these types of problems, what are ways that we can kind of approach the bias that don't end up falling into the Gemini style solution where we just throw insert diversity statement onto our prompts?
The question was what are the different ways that, specifically when we talk about the example of Gemini and how they've done prompt alternation in a way that became very controversial and kind of incorrect. What are the things that we can do to kind of make sure that doesn't happen when we're adding this diversity? The answer, in my opinion, is not something magical right now. It's putting it in front of the users, right? I remember I was in a talk about, I don't remember whether it was specifically about DALL-E or Microsoft Bing or Microsoft Designer, one of these things. They're very similar in terms of, let's say, it was about a software, an AI tool that would generate images. And I remember the UX researchers in the talk said before it got launched, for 6 months they were putting it in front of diverse audiences, and they would come up with prompts, and they would see how these prompts and the expectations are different. Oh, sorry. That's exactly how you learn. What is the other way of doing it? You're going to learn a lot after you launch it, after you get the data. The way that it's not a representative of the company I work for, the way that I look at it is that as long as people don't give you a very negative comment, it means it's doing the job, kind of. You can kind of assume that nothing bad is happening, nothing major is happening. So yes, the AI tools can learn from themselves, they can become better, they will give you, user is going to give the thumbs up, thumbs down, they're going to help make it better, they're going to give feedback. But the truth is, until you don't put it in front of users, you will never know. You have a chance to correct these things before they become bigger, before they become part of these biases in the world that is happening. So why not do that? Just put it in front of 5 to 10 people. That's usually the talk that I have with our stakeholders. I'm like, it's not going to necessarily take you 2 months or 3 months. We can do it in 1 hour. We can do it in 1 week. It can happen. We can still get data. Okay, seems like we're at the time. Thank you so much for helping me out, everybody back there. Thank you so much for being part of this talk. I'm so passionate about these conversations. You can find me here. If you search my name, probably the LinkedIn result is me because I write my name in a weird way. So feel free to reach out to me. I would be more than happy to chat about anything. Thank you so much.